Yeah, there's certainly areas where there are multi-generations involved
Mhm.
and there's complexity. How to just have the conversations, usually the getting started piece of like, how do we have the conversations with our adult children and how do we approach those conversations? And even before the conversations, what do we even want? Maybe there's some uncertainty around or a
Mhm.
lack of clarity, like who am
Mhm.
I? Who do I want to be? And that's not just an issue for multi-generation families. It's for, yeah, I think all of us.
Welcome to Wealth Coherence. I'm your host, Emily Bouchard, a social worker specializing in human development and fascinated by human potential. For over 20 years, I've been a coach to families with successful businesses and leaders with successful careers. And you may be surprised to learn that true wealth is about coherence. When our inner state of being aligns with how we live, give, lead, and love. In this series, we will explore an integrated model to flourish coherently, because wealth isn't what we have, it's who we are when we are fully aligned. Welcome to this edition of Wealth Coherence, where we have a wonderful guest by the name of Ashley Quamme. And she is somebody I've been respecting and following for quite a while in terms of the whole space of the connection between the emotional side of wealth and money and the financial side. And when we really think about coherence, it's how do we know that the decisions we're making are really in tune and aligned with who we are. And so often our emotions can help us with that, or they can also kind of derail it or take it off track. And so this conversation is going to be about how Ashley works with the advisors and also with client facing and really supporting this integration of a holistic approach to the people in relationship to the wealth. So can you start off, Ashley, by introducing yourself and just saying a little bit about how you've ended up in this space? Because I think it's a fascinating story.
It is a fascinating story, a story that had you asked me 15 years ago if I thought that this is where I'd be, I would probably laugh and say, no, absolutely not. My home discipline is in marriage and family therapy. So I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. And prior to working in financial services, had my own private practice where I specialized in seeing couples and family. Emily, that is what I thought I would do for my entire professional career is I'm going to be a couples and family therapist. Life just had a different direction for me, which is great. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
So prior to COVID, I started to notice a lot more conversations around money showing up on my couch, literally on my couch, my therapy couch. And I was working and tended to see at the time couples who were high income, dual professionals. And from a cash flow standpoint, from an income standpoint, money was not the problem. And even for some of these couples or families, there were other aspects of wealth, including inheritances, trusts that, these like words just started kind of coming up in conversation. And I didn't know entirely what they all meant in the context of how it contributed to the problem that they were having. Things would get thrown out, statements would get thrown out. And,
You
my
don't mean bank statements. You mean like
no,
some
not bank statements. Oh, that's so funny. No, not bank statements, word statements.
yes.
You know, things like just pull it from the trust, or, some of these were medical professionals too. So just pick up like extra shifts, or you can go and moonlight at, these other hospitals. So
Mhm.
there were just things that like would get thrown out like around money. And I didn't have the clinical competency to know how to navigate it. So all of my skills and tricks and things like that just weren't working. And it didn't feel good, quite honestly.
Being a licensed marital and family therapist years ago, switched to coaching, but there's no training. Like when we went through our training to support families and couples and individuals, it's not like there's courses on, well, there are now in some places, and we'll talk about that include that this is a significant issue in people's lives, and you really need to understand how to support them. So then, yeah, it's like we have to explore and find where we can get
Yeah.
additional training on that. So yeah, let's hear what you found for yourself.
So my husband is a CFP and I, would ask him from time to time, like this couple's kind of fighting about this, like, well, I don't know. They don't teach us how to deal with that. And it was like, oh. that's interesting. And so what do most of us do when we have no idea, about something? We Google it. And so I literally typed into my Google search engine, therapeutic interventions for couples with money problems, and financial therapy came up. And so I followed really just that breadcrumb trail of learning and understanding, and I became really fascinated and interested in it. And so from there, I went back to school. I went to K-State for a graduate certificate in financial therapy and became certified and started working then therapeutically really with couples and with families around money issues. Where the pivot into financial services came is as I started working more in the financial therapy kind of space, advisors would ask questions like, can you help me with this client? Or what do you think about this? And my curiosity just kind of like sparked. And I was like, I think this would be really cool if a therapist worked inside of a firm. And if we blend it, it makes me think of from the mental health side of things, we call it like a treatment team approach. And so when I first started, I worked in a adolescent inpatient psychiatric hospital. And so there was from all these different disciplines, there was a treatment team that was really thinking about the client, thinking about the child from each of like the disciplines that they were coming from. And so that was kind of this like fantasy of like, hey, what if like in financial services and financial planning, like what if like we approached client interaction and work from several different disciplines, including the therapeutic side. And so I just kind of, crazy thought idea, just was like, I really think that this is cool. And I think this is my next thing. And so several years ago, then kind of launched the fractional chief behavioral officer services for advisory firms, for advisors. And Emily, I've just kind of been rolling and trucking along since then.
Yeah, and your podcast has been such a service to the industry. You've really woken up people to how to think about it because it's been done. Like I worked as a managing partner in a firm where my partner Jamie Traeger Muni was the first PhD psychologist hired by a bank. It was Wells Fargo at the time, where they had an in-house therapeutic support for the ultra high net worth clients in the bank. And then US Bank followed suit in their ascent. And that's where I worked for a number of years. And then I went and ran the Institute for Family Success at PNC Private Bank, Hawthorne. And like there's this current of, oh, our clients need way more than just the financial piece. And it's also an important differentiator to have that. And I love how you came up with the fractional piece where multiple firms can utilize you, but they don't have to, commit to a full-time position, or they can really just have you on retainers so that you can work with them, training and clients. I mean, that's what I'm doing with the chief learning officer role as well. And I think I'd love to talk a little bit about like how you're finding that firms use you and really benefit from your work as well in terms of bringing this awareness to them and their clients.
The client facing aspect of the role is probably where my time and expertise is utilized the most. And that is actually what excites me, truthfully. That's what I wanted, is for advisors and firms to be able to say, hey, we have this team member, Ashley, which is kind of cool. Here's her background. And I'm hearing you're struggling with this particular decision around money, around finances. Would you be interested in having a conversation? And so that part of my work, the one-on-one, is where I'm utilized the most. But also kind of right behind that would be co-facilitated meetings as well.
It's the collaborative, yeah.
Yeah, so coming in alongside the advisor and having conversations, not for every meeting, but for some meetings where life decisions are being made or where there are stuck points or have been stuck points and it's been difficult to move past, and then it's starting to affect or impact the financial plan. What I find with families is when there are multiple generations involved, it's complicated and complex, and there are multiple, quote, right ways or decisions or things of going about doing stuff. So the co-facilitated aspect of meetings, family meetings, individual client meetings is also a close second. So that's where that's where I like spending my time. And that's where I find there's a lot of attraction for bringing in a chief behavioral officer fractionally. But, beyond the plan, the business, the practice, it really
Mhm.
is a complete coverage service model in that we do serve clients. We offer client support, but then there's also the advisor support and firm
Mhm.
support as well. So, going back just to your question, the client support arena or aspect is probably where this role gets utilized the most, which I think is great. I think everyone wins in that scenario.
Mhm. Yeah, one thing I found that's been really helpful is creating an ongoing dialogue about it, because there is this like, oh, we have Ashley or we have Emily, but what do they do? Or yeah, I know some people are using it, but if they hear these like success stories that their colleagues are having by bringing us in at different times, it really opens up their awareness. I mean, I remember one instance where I've been working with the family and we'd done a bunch around communication and trust building. And it was time for like a joint meeting where their estate planning attorney was there and their accountant was there. And they were starting to do presentations around how the estate plan had been designed and really wanted to include the family in understanding it so everybody would be on the same page. And the brother innocuously just made a comment that he thought was fine. And the advisor kept going on. And I knew that his three sisters' emotional landmines were blowing up in their heads because of what he said, because I'd interviewed everybody, as I'm sure you do, and you understand the nuances and what's underneath some of the dynamics within the family system. And so I just asked the advisor to pause for a moment and just say, hold on a minute, let's just unpack a little bit of what just happened and what was said. And because we had had enough prior coaching, they trusted that I would support them in doing it. And we were able to diffuse those landmines really quickly, give a voice to it in a way where everybody felt heard and took care of it. And then everybody was able to listen and get the value of what the advisor was saying. Because when you have that emotional trigger happen, you can't hear anything else, right? You can't take in that information. And the advisor was super grateful. The family was grateful. Everybody was able to really get the benefit of the meeting. And it only took like 5 minutes. It wasn't a massive intervention that happened. It's just knowing how to kind of like, I like the image of those rumble strips at the side of the road when you get the kind of off track a little bit, but you're still safe. And it's like, oh, okay, let's get back into our lane. let's take care of what might have got us off track a bit. And I think that that's such a value that we bring to the conversation. And the more the advisors see that, know that, and share it with each other, the more likely they're going to use us in situations to maybe keep something like that from happening or address it when it does.
Yeah. I find that for not all, I certainly wouldn't say all, but a lot of advisors, uh, especially the ones who are maybe doing like the comprehensive planning like aspect of it, is that there seems to be a pressure that they have to kind of be everything for their client. And sure, they might bring in other specialists like an estate attorney, a tax specialist, what have you, but there's still this pressure of like, I have to carry this load and be everything to this family and or to this client. And so, you know, that can be a lot, feeling like I have to also then navigate landmines or be aware enough to know, right? If I am the primary, let's just say contact, for the family. And I really think, your story just kind of highlights why it is also helpful to have a specialist like myself or like you on the team that can help lighten some of the mental and even physical like load
Yeah.
there, so that really like the planner can focus on like their zone of genius, like the things that like make them great, their expertise
Mhm.
there.
I think too, it actually has them be more trusted, right? Because it's like they can own their lane, they know where their specialty is, and then they can say, look, I know what you need. I'm not the expert in it, but we've got a great person on our team that we're going to bring in. And then they show up as an authority about it and they know what's needed, and then they bring in the right resources. And I also, do you find this as well, that some of them are protected because the client relationship means so much to them and they want to make sure that it's under the purview of what they know that they can handle, like, and that's safe for them. And to have them to get out of their comfort zone to see that it's actually going to be even better and it's going to serve them and their clients even more to have this other perspective. Helping to bridge that can be so important within the firm itself. How do you go about supporting them and seeing that it's a benefit to their practice and not going to be jeopardizing something?
Yeah, there's has been comments or worries around, and some of them have been, you know, like worried around me taking their clients, which is
Mhm.
interesting because I
Can I
can't
get the word?
like take, that one. I've had that happen like very small, but it struck me in a way of like, that's really interesting because if you step back, like, I can't actually take your clients. Like, I'm not a financial planner. So, but there is like, it speaks to me, I guess, just in a way. There is this fear or uncertainty
Mhm.
around letting go and allowing someone else in. And I try to think about it in a way of you're being protective and you
Mhm.
want the best. I try, Emily. I'm not perfect. Sometimes, sometimes, my own humanness kind of comes out in my
Mhm.
thoughts. But yeah, from, all of what you said, I think is true. And where I tend to lean into in terms of explaining or coaching, if you
Mhm.
will, around just the benefit of it is that it does actually increase that trust factor
Mhm.
there when you are able to say, hey, I have this person who has this knowledge base and they are a specialist in this way. And, while I know a little bit about this, this person knows a lot more about it. It absolutely just increases that level of trust in being able to say, like, I don't know everything, and
Mhm.
there is somebody better than me, right? There's a humility piece to it,
Yeah.
and I think that resonates with clients and goes a long way and knowing, okay,
Mhm.
my advisor, they know their boundaries, they know what they're great at, but they
Mhm.
also know what they're maybe not so great at. And, that feels really safe to know that if we come up to a place where they may not be the best fit, they're going to put me in the right hands.
Yeah.
So I wholeheartedly agree with you from that place.
And I think that the collaborative approach really helps them to feel more at ease, like they're going to be in the meeting, they're going to be included in different ways if the family's open to it. And then even when I do stuff with the family separately, like maybe we'll do a values clarification by themselves, or maybe we'll do something around communication and trust, and something will come up. In the action steps at the end, we always look at what is it that you want the advising team to know? How can we move this forward with your advising team coming into the next conversation? So that there's always, as if they have a seat at the table even when they're not in the room, so that there's a sense of we're all working as a cohesive team. And I think that that also makes a difference. I mean, have you seen that? Or
I have. I kind of jokingly will say to advisors who might be a little bit uncertain, like, think about when you go to the doctor, or if you've ever gone to the doctor and this has happened, like, think about, and your doctor, your primary care physician comes in and says, hey, Emily, I've got this other person who is a specialist in this thing that I think you might need. And, you know, here's what's going to happen. This specialist, who is very well trained, is going to come in and also think about you and what you need. And instead of one person thinking about what you need, you're actually going to have two pretty brilliant minds thinking about you and
Mhm.
how to serve you and how to help you. How does that sound? I very like dramatically kind of, with some sorry, like explain it that way because most patients in that scenario. And I don't want to say always, but most, right, people in that scenario are going to be like, that sounds great. Like, more people thinking about me from different areas and from different lanes, like they want to think about me and help me. Like, that actually sounds really great. Most people are going to be agreeable, to that. And so, sometimes, at least I will say, when I've explained, if guys are like, oh yeah, okay, I guess you're right. Like, I
like
don't know what
it's
I'm
something
worried
that yeah,
worried
they
about.
can. It's relatable. And, I think I want to go back to, I would add to that analogy, the idea of a multidisciplinary team, because it's one thing for your doctor to say, here's a referral slip, go to that person. Right. And it's like, they're operating in a silo and your doctor's operating in a silo. And then okay, they're going to give each other's test results. And that's one way of doing it. Another
Sure.
is, look, we have a multidisciplinary team. I mean, when I worked in child life and social work within a children's hospital, I was part of a multidisciplinary team. And so when we would do a case review of a child and their care, everyone that was touching that child was part of that
Yes.
review. And it made a holistic approach to everything from nutrition to the social work to the emotional to the oncology with the actual treatments, but then also radiology and all these other places. And they were making sure that everything was coordinated and that whatever was happening in one area was going to be incorporated into what was happening elsewhere. And I loved how you said that earlier. And I think by being a fractional chief behavioral officer, chief learning officer, chief family officer within the structure of the firm, it's not siloed. It's like,
Right.
look, it's like we're going to bring a specialist in and we're working together as a multidisciplinary team to make sure all your needs get met. And it just opens up that like people can relax. It's like, oh, we're really being taken care of.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And with your work with the behavior side of finance, I'd love for you to share a little bit about what would you say are the most common areas that you see you are asked to come in to address, and that you are able to make quite a difference through your work in terms of what's happening in the firm with the clients.
Yeah, there's certainly areas where there are multi generations involved.
Mhm.
Um, and there's complexity, how to just have the conversations, usually the getting started piece of like, how do we have the conversations with our adult children, and how do we approach those conversations, and even before the conversations, what do we even want? Maybe there's some uncertainty around, or a
Mhm.
lack of clarity, I should say. You mentioned like values clarification. That's certainly an area, even within like identity, like who am
Mhm.
I? Who do I want to be? And that's not just an issue for multi-generation families. It's for, I think, all of us. So, apart from just navigating the aspects of a family system as it relates to money, things around couples dynamics too are very, very common. And with my background, as a couples therapist, I really enjoy it. So, whether it's difficulties making decisions, whether it's misalignment around, financial decision making, spending, underspending, overspending, a lot of those, but blended family issues too, Emily. And so I think that that's just one area that does not get talked about a lot, yet it is so common, in our culture. And so, blended families kind of have, there are unique aspects to working with them, and certainly a level of complexity from a not just a financial standpoint, but mentally, emotionally, psychologically as well. So I could probably list out like 50 other like just kind of behaviors or patterns.
Mhm.
Those are a few of what I've been working with. I'll just say this year. um, this
Yeah,
year.
it's so interesting. And I would say in terms of blended families, because, writing the book on estate planning for blended families and really diving into this for, oh my gosh, 20 years, there's more and more research coming out. I mean, Michael Van Cleve's work
Oh yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
fantastic.
He was on my podcast. He's fantastic. He's
It's so
wonderful.
great what he's showing. And this whole thing about fair versus equal, and how
Yes.
when the complexity of the estate plan gets to a certain place, and how do you define family?
Hmm.
And what are the expectations, spoken or unspoken? What promises are there? It's so important to make it explicit and transparent within the whole family system, and to create that safety to be able to have those conversations when people aren't going to be treated equally. And what
Right.
does that look like? And it's really hard for parents, and they need that extra support in terms of how to do this. But it makes such a difference. I mean, I had somebody I worked with, oh my gosh, over 15 years ago. And she texted me and said, oh my gosh, that work we did and how we met with the blended family and talked to the kids about our thinking about the estate plan. My husband just died 6 months ago. If we hadn't done that, I would be in the nightmare right now. Like she texted me to thank me for something we'd done years before, because everybody was on the same page about what the thinking was behind what they had planned.
Yeah.
And that seems to be the most important thing for these families, is how to communicate about the reasoning behind things, what's wanting to be addressed, and what's wanting to be like insulating the family from as well. And then getting everybody on the same page, listening, getting input. They know that the parents have the final say, but then there's so much more likelihood of buy-in and respect for the decisions. And then everybody knows, especially if somebody's in a position of having to fulfill those wishes, right? With their power of attorney or being the executor or trustee. And if everybody's on the same page, that person is in kind of that thankless role, gets to do their role more easily because they're not going to have to deal with contention.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And the more complex the family, the more fascinating. And, you know, I just get so interested in like how to support them and their communication.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's where I like to live. But
Mhm.
I say, or I will joke, like I don't know what that says about me, but that is the area that I love to live, is within family dynamic complexity, at
Mhm.
least on the emotional, relational side.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's fun to like play with this. You know, everybody talks about, oh, this is the softer side, right? But it's like the numbers are often the easier side. There's structures that are in place, but this other side that's soft is that can be harder for people. And that's where we get to come in and make it not so difficult and maybe more enjoyable.
I
Yeah.
mean, I think that, yeah, I could give a TED talk on why I think soft skills, the softer side, is, yeah, it's not the best term for it. So I agree. It is oftentimes it is the harder aspect of the work.
Hmm. Yeah. And when advisors really get that, then they know that they don't have to do the heavy lifting with it, right? That they have that support. So it's wonderful. And could you speak a little bit into the resistances that you might encounter from advisors? We talked a little bit about maybe protection, or maybe they need to be the one that's in charge of everything. Like anything else you've seen that you've had to navigate or bridge so that you can help them see the value and benefit?
Yeah, I think, just educating, there's a degree of like educating like on really like when is the right time to bring in this type of role. um what are the guardrails there? And there's some gray. It can be a little bit gray. It's not quite so black and white. um but I think that when the upfront work is, hey, what scenarios are we going to bring in this role?
Mhm.
What scenarios might require, you know, talking about kind of bringing in this role and jointly kind of decide. And then what areas are like, yeah, no, like we definitely don't, need, I'll say, like this role. Like just talking about that. You mentioned expectations, like that word, and I think that's a great word. Like, what are the expectations? Like, what is each person's role? What are the scenarios in which we all come together? What are the scenarios in which, for the work that I do, like that Ashley is just going to meet, individually, like with this family? How are we going to talk about that? And let's practice talking about it, because
Yes.
I have found that when there is a lack of confidence in talking about
Mhm.
doing something new from a business side of things, and that might be, referring your clients to your, fractional chief behavioral officer or whatever it is. When there's
Mhm.
a lack of confidence, it can come across as, doubt, uncertainty, and clients can feel that. And so they're not as likely to buy into or engage, even if it's a great thing. Like they can feel and sense that, like, oh, like I hear you saying that I should talk to Ashley, but I can read your body language and kind of tell and hear that you're a little maybe like uncertain. So,
Well, that's the
maybe I'll see her, but I may not be quite as engaged.
yes.
Um, so yeah, some education, I think,
Mhm.
around the role, expectations, even just practicing
Mhm.
on talking about it is where I don't want to say that there's resistance, but where work is needed to be done.
Yeah. It's so interesting because this is the name of this podcast is Wealth Coherence. And what you just described is what happens when we're in front of somebody and there's an incoherence. When they're saying one thing, but you're experiencing something else viscerally, like it's, wait, there's something that's telling me that they're not comfortable with this, even as they're telling me it's a good thing. And that is an incoherent state that you pick up on it. It's like something doesn't feel right. You know, you might not be able to put your finger on it. So that's a really good example. And You made me think about when I was going through my marital and family therapy training, and there was the one-way mirrors so that my supervisors were on the other side of the mirror, so the family was always taken care of. And also other people being trained could see and get trained as well. And when families would come in, if the trainee was super comfortable with it and presented it like, you're like won the lottery. Like, you don't just get me, you get like the most phenomenal people right here. That, and you know, they might even call in on this phone and give me some suggestions because they really want this to be successful. They're like all for it. They're like, woohoo, how do we
Yeah.
get so lucky? But if I'm in
Yeah.
this place of, or the trainees in the place of, oh, you know, I hope you don't mind. And, you know, it's not that big of a deal. And don't even worry about the mirror. It's like, they're going to be totally uncomfortable and not want it, you know, and it's all in having that total congruence within yourself around how valuable these added things are. So I love how you said that. It really makes sense. I've also found that when firms create like client education events, and they combine the technical with the qualitative in some way, right? Where you or I present on, you know, how do you parent in affluence? Or, oh, if you're talking about family business transitions, you know, you might have great M&A experts and investment advisors and, you know, strategic planning for the business side. And if you have somebody like us that's there and introduces this topic of how do you prepare the family for this? And how do you decide about whether you keep it in the family or sell it, and the identity piece that you talked about, and bring up those topics. And in every time I would do this, and I went around the country doing this with teams, and we would do this like family success and family business transitions, everyone was wholly engaged, stayed longer, leaning in, wanting more. And like the head of the commercial bank came to one of them and she said, oh my gosh, we've been totally missing this important piece. You know, I've been to so many of these things and they get dry. People are like, oh, this is the same thing. This was different. This was, and then look at how they're so interested, right? And it's, so people that never had any comfort level talking about it suddenly see how much it adds to the conversation and the engagement. Oh, and that was the other question I had for you. Do you find that the advisors that you work with are now getting in front of more family members as a result of you being involved versus just the decision maker that they had been working with? Has that translated at all?
Great question, and probably something that I should add to my metrics of what I should maybe keep track of. Yeah. So
Mhm.
I can't answer that question. I would love to answer it with, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but that,
I would
I,
say add it to your metrics because, you know,
yeah, I don't have the data to support
oh,
that. But look, here's the thing. I do think that um, it is, you know, it is not lost upon most advisors now that getting in front of, having communication with, having connection,
mhm.
relationship with that next generation is important if they would like to continue to possibly be successful. I don't think that it's lost upon most advisors. I think most advisors know that. And what I will say with at least the firms, the advisors that I do work with and work for, is that I believe from my anecdotal observations, evidence that there is greater confidence in being able to have those conversations, being able to, I don't want to say offer different services, but being able to appeal to that next generation
Mhm.
with somebody like myself on the team. And I think that that's, you know, how successful they are then in actually getting in front of them, I don't know. But I do believe that the ones that I've been working for, and some of them now a few years, like there is just greater confidence in knowing like, hey, we've got more of a complete coverage treatment team, multidisciplinary,
Yeah.
firm here. And like, yeah, I feel pretty good talking to the next generation because even if I don't know exactly how to address them or what to do, I've got people like on my team that do know. And so I feel pretty dang good about that. So, I will answer your question and maybe saying that, but, I don't know. And like maybe next year we can, come back on and you
Yeah,
can ask
let's
me
find out.
again and I can give
Yes.
you some data, some actual data.
Mhm. Well, and I do think too, the other piece of data that I've collected, I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years, is the other one is spouses or partners. So often there can be like this division, right? Like, no, you do the finances, we do this. Or there might be like ways that the advisors have been trying to get in front of the spouse or the partner, but they don't show up as interested, or they are disengaged. Or they might come to some events, but they're just not coming to the investment meetings or whatever it might be. And when you bring in somebody like us and we're talking about how's it going with your mom and your kids, and being in the sandwich generation, and like just bringing up different things that like, whoa, somebody wants to know about this too. It's like there's more engagement with the spouse or the partner, and I find that that's definitely been something that I've seen as a direct result of bringing in somebody like us.
Yeah, I would agree. That I have actually seen more interest in. And I don't know how true this is, but it's something that I have wondered. So most of the advisors that I work for are males. And uh, I do feel like having a male female co-facilitators, like
Mhm.
so for the advisor who is a male, bringing in a female like co-facilitator. I have had those conversations with advisors like, oh yeah, the female partner or the other part, like they were so much more like engaged. This was a much better. And so I have wondered, just from a gender standpoint, like having, both genders represented on the team, if that is helpful when it comes to engagement for spouses, typically your female partner. So I don't have hard data, but I do that part, I do think that there is some benefit there, whether it's the profession, whether it's the discipline, or it's the gender, I'm not quite sure, but those conversations do tend to lead to greater engagement, particularly for female spouses.
Yes. And one little anecdote is a male advisor that brought me in to work with him and a couple on something. He said something that he thought would be funny and would be appropriate. And it was cringeworthy for me, and thinking about the woman in the room. And I thought, oh, he has a completely unconscious bias here in terms of how he's operating, and he actually thought that was a good thing to say. And so I was able to kind of redirect and bring some humor, but to also kind of acknowledge that that might not have landed so well, and to bring another way of thinking about it. And then afterwards I asked him if he'd be open to some coaching and some support around how to be even much more effective with the women that he works with. And that was a really big turning point for him, because he was open to becoming aware and conscious of things that he'd been unconscious of. And for me, that's really fulfilling in my work. And I'm sure you must experience that too, when somebody has this kind of moment of, oh, I can get even better and more effective by becoming more self-aware.
Yeah, I have the pleasure of working truly with advisors teams where there is a genuine interest in wanting to be better. And so there's not a lot of resistance, teeth pulling even, or like, oh gosh, like they said that thing in your example, right? And it's like, oh, that was not super great. But then they're not willing, they're defensive or they don't
Mhm.
disappoint. So the advisors, the teams that I work with, I feel incredibly grateful that all of them are just genuinely interested and receptive to feedback. And there's a strong desire to like just do and be better all around.
Love that. Oh my gosh, how wonderful for you. When we're coherent in who we are and what we have to offer in the world, the people that are attracted and want to work with us and want to play with us in this domain are just like that. They're going to be resonating with that frequency that we're bringing to the conversation. And how wonderful for you to have that play out in the people you get to work with. That's excellent. Well, how can people find you? And we'll be happy to put it in the show notes and let people know, but we'd just love for you to say, as people are listening, what's the best way to reach you to learn more about your work as a fractional chief behavioral officer?
Yeah, I hang out on LinkedIn. So you can find me, Ashley Quamme, there. It's where I hang out and post, engage, interact
Mhm.
there. So you can definitely check me out there. As you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation here, I host the Planning and Beyond podcast, where I have conversations similar to this and bring on guests to chat about all things money, meaning, that intersection there. And so I've had the privilege of having some pretty fantastic conversations with leading
Mhm.
industry experts in the financial psychology, behavioral finance space, which is pretty cool. I'm like, kind of fangirl. I feel like almost every episode I'm like having a fangirl moment. So you can check me out, check out the podcast there. And then my website, which is www.beyondthefp.com. You can check out just our work and what we do at Beyond the Plan and how we serve advisors, firms, and families.
Love it. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and thank you for the work you're doing and the great bridging you're doing between the quantitative and the qualitative.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Wealth Coherence. If it resonated, I'd love for you to share it or leave a review. This will help others find their way to this space. And if you're ready to keep exploring what it means to live, lead, and give from a place of coherence, head to emilybouchard.com to stay connected. Until next time, be well internally and allow your external life to be the fullest expression of who you truly are.